Welcome to a very special episode of Pivotal. I'm Tara McEwen, the founder of McEwen Media and the host of this program. In these conversations, I sit down with business owners and I help them unearth the full extent of their business story, all the twists, the turns, the mistakes, and the errors that we made in the past that we've now learned from and are building from in business today. Every business is a work in progress. And in these conversations, we're looking back at these pivotal moments and extracting the learnings, knowing how they've worked out. But here's the interesting thing. When you're in the pivot, when you're making changes and choices to your business and you're not sure how they're going to work out, that's a very different experience. That's a very different way to be in your business and how you judge your present, your past, and just the inability to see the future. This is what was captured in my conversation with my next guest, Adrienne Giroux. Now, Adrienne has spent more than 2 decades creating unforgettable events, including film and television wrap parties, working on her dream gig at Fashion Cares, and even leading the events team for the Toronto International Film Festival. So whether it's an intimate cocktail party or a 2,500 person gala, Adrienne knows how to make any gathering great. Her love of food started in childhood. She grew up in Paris. And after many years of planning the menus for special events, she learned that the best gatherings happened around a great meal. This led her to launch Chef in the House, a curated dining experience that brings Toronto's top chefs right into your kitchen. Now that is the introduction that Adrienne sent me beforehand to read. In the course of this conversation, you're going to discover the business idea that Adrienne had and launched, and all of her years of experience, they're all coming together in this very special and pivotal moment for Chef in the House. We've already promised to do a follow-up because the decisions and choices she's making now are going to change her business drastically, but she doesn't know how. So in this conversation, you're going to see in real time the challenges that a business owner faces when the future looks uncertain. Every decision is hard, but it's only in looking back at all of the moments in your life that brought you here, that's where you can draw on the confidence, the insight, and maybe even find the future through whatever challenge your business is facing. So let's get started. Adrienne, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to get into your story. So how I like to begin these conversations is simply, how is business for you today, and how does it feel to be in your business?
So business today it's just ever changing, from where I started 5 years ago to where I am today, it's constantly evolving. And I'm certainly having to evolve quite a lot right now. There's a feeling of excitement just because I think when you're an entrepreneur, there's always growth that's going to be happening. You have to adapt. And, as my event planner background, you're kind of like always having to have plan B, plan C. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So there's an excitement in trying to move forward with where I am right now. But there's also kind of like, well, is this going to work? There's always 1,000 questions that go along with that. So it's a nervous excitement.
And what I find fascinating is that you are in the hospitality industry, and in the conversations that I've had for this podcast, a lot of businesses of all sizes, we're feeling it now. So I'm actually going to be fascinated looking back at this experience and seeing like just what does the global economy look like once these trade decisions and deals are all done. Because in the moment, for me, for sure, this pressure cooker has forced me to make some really tough choices, right? Some really, not just business strategy choices, but like values and how I see myself and how I see myself in the world. And I've talked to other people who are working in marketing who are having a similar experience. So I know definitely in the marketing and media and publicity place, budgets are just non-existent in a lot of markets. So it's like, oh, where did the money go? And I imagine hospitality similar to 5 years ago, right? In the pandemic and lockdown, hospitality is also having a moment. Like, I just ordered takeout last night and I was like, hang on a second, this meal used to cost me $30, now it's 50. What is happening? So are these some of the challenges and changes that Chef in the House is facing?
I mean, yes and no. I think we need to backtrack that while I'm in hospitality, I'm not in the restaurant, game per se.
Right, right.
So, what I'm doing as a service as a culinary experience might be a little bit different than what's happening in the restaurants, but you do see that there's a bit of a trickle down effect to some degree.
Mhm,
The cost of food is on the rise, and that
mhm.
is just, a lot of people have a hard time understanding, well, why is the cost of things going up? It's not, as you said, from a takeout perspective, it's not just the cost of food, it's the cost of gas, it's the cost of takeout containers, it's the
Yep.
cost of all of these things that kind of have this, mushroom effect in terms of how things kind of have that scope creep and cost.
Mhm.
And so we do see that on our end as well. We used to be able to provide a 3-course meal and appetizers for a certain price point, but now we have to kind of bring that up a little bit. And that can be
Mhm.
tough for some people if they are on a budget. So it's about making sure that we can still make things accessible for the group at large,
Mhm.
but also making sure that, we're still making margins.
Yeah, and I imagine too for you, there's a messaging challenge as well because Chef in the House, it's a very unique dining experience, right? Like,
Yes.
it's not, people don't automatically know what a chef-led dining experience would look like or feel like. So I imagine too, like in your sales and marketing messaging, you're also introducing a new idea in an
Yes.
atmosphere and a clientele where people are already having a moment but with their food budget. So yeah, I just as we kind of unpack and I'm trying to visualize like what you're up against. It's a lot of stuff that's internal into your business and how it runs, but then also just these external factors that you're now trying to navigate and figure out. So let's go back to the beginning then. You mentioned a Chef in the House started 5 years ago. So what was going on in your life, in your world when you started this concept?
So prior to, okay, well, I'll circle back maybe just a little bit more. So I worked at TIFF for 10 years. I was
Mhm.
part of the event production team and I moved around a little bit in my tenure there. I left in 2019 to go to another job. It didn't quite work out. And so I had to take a step back and kind of recalibrate. And what ended up happening, that was in the fall of 2019. And so,
Mm.
I gave myself space because it was November. And so we went into the new year. And then my husband and I were going to have a 3-week honeymoon or not honeymoon, like an anniversary
Right.
getaway. And then that was in February of 2020. So, that trip got cut short and then we came home. We
Yep.
came home and, we were in full lockdown and my daughter at the time was 6 years old. And I can tell you that like senior kindergarten online learning is not a thing. So I
Mhm.
really had to kind of focus on her but that also gave me the opportunity to really focus on what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
It really provided me this opportunity to reimagine my career. Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? I love event planning. It's been my longstanding career, 20 years in. At that point, I knew that I wanted to still maintain something in that field. I've always loved food. I've always loved planning all of the culinary, aspects of any special event that I was working on. So I kind of was like, oh, where can we find something kind of in this space? And over COVID, there's a lot of people doing these chef-led virtual dinners and virtual
Mm, mhm.
experiences. And I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then it kind of reminded me of a time when I was young and I lived in Paris and my parents used to host these chef-led dinner parties. And they were like magical. And I just had such fond memories of like setting the table and lighting the candles and my parents got to cook these amazing meals and become really great cooks as a result of it. And so I was like, I wonder if anything like that exists here. So I
Mhm.
kind of did my research at that time and realized that there's a lot of private chefs out there that will come into your kitchen and do the private chef experience, but or you could go to a cooking school like Dish or Aphrodite Cooks, where you're kind of doing a cooking class and you're doing a dish from start to finish. But there was nothing that was really bringing chefs into your home for chef-led dining experience, demoing what that food is going to be and doing it kind of from start to finish, but in the comfort of your home. So that is where Chef in the House, the idea was born. And I used that first year, 2020 into 2021, to kind of lay the foundation and get my, all my branding and marketing and the website built and everything. So my soft launch was January 2021, which, again, an interesting time to really try and be like, hey, let's get people into people's houses, when we were still in some relative form of lockdown at the time.
Yes, my story senses are kind of going haywire. So I want to slow things way down here, because there's something about, as you're describing, like the chef-led dining experience, like this is a childhood memory for you. I'm hearing this description and I was like, hang on a second, I can have like Gordon Ramsay level, like to me, a chef is a celebrity, and a talented chef, good enough to like work in a restaurant or run a restaurant that isn't necessarily it, but even a chain. That is talent and artistry. So to have that person come into my home and make a meal, that sounds very bougie and special. I want to spend some more time hearing more about your experience at the Toronto International Film Festival, because that's another, I don't think people realize, TIFF as an event, as an industry event, I think it's the only film festival that is accessible to the general public. And I feel like that TIFF had that energy. So you're an event planner, part of this festival that prides itself on taking something very bougie, very red carpet, very elite, and bringing it to the masses. I kind of love how, even though you were done with that experience, that feeling of wanting to bring this bougie experience to people carried through with you and Chef in the House. So let's spend more time talking then. What was it like working at TIFF? Like, how long did you work there?
So I was there for 10 years. It was probably the best work experience that I ever had. I mean, when I started, they were just opening up TIFF Bell Lightbox. So, Toronto International Film Festival was going from what was known as a 10-day festival to a building that was open 365 days a year. So I was one of their very first hires in their event department to kind of help lead the charge in terms of like, well, what's going to happen as we build this new building, and what's going to take shape in here. They knew obviously that they were going to be operating 365 days a year, and that was going to be largely for internal events, beyond just TIFF that we know in September. There's Canada's Top 10, there's TIFF Kids, there's other festival activities that happen throughout the year. So our team was really in charge of doing that. And then over time, I became their lead person for doing all their big signature events. Because prior to that, they had outsourced and hired an event producer. And eventually that I took on that role, which was super exciting. I mean, back, at that time, I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And it was like, for me, that was the pinnacle of like the golden ticket for a career. And I loved all the people there. I'm still friends with them. I mean, to this day, we are, I actually just had someone reach out to me recently that I haven't seen in probably 7 years. And she texted me for some event advice. So, it's like the strongest ties ever, because we worked so hard to build something from the ground up, like quite literally. And for me, it just gives me goosebumps sometimes talking about it, because I loved it so much. And my role did change over time. So I spent, 5-6 years in the event production team. And then I kind of moved over to event sales, where I was, the person responsible for bringing in third-party events into the building. So I got to see things and learn things from a different angle. And then eventually, I also moved into corporate partnerships. So working with some key accounts like L'Oreal and Cineplex and A&E, again, giving me a really good lens of how TIFF as a not-for-profit, needs its partners. And I ran our hospitality partner program also for many years. So that was an in-kind partnership that we had with hotels and restaurants.
Okay.
Again, with TIFF being a not-for-profit, most parties would not have happened without the support of all these partners. And so I gained a lot of, friends and colleagues in the hospitality industry. So that actually helped, when Chef in the House was coming about, that really helped because I had some really amazing contacts in the chef/hospitality world that I could reach out to as I was kind of coming up with this idea. They were great to be able to just, pick their brains and ask questions on certain things and get their advice.
Yeah, contacts, but also experience. I'm connecting really to being in that early phase of your career. I always tell people that's when you want to work in a startup. Your first job should be new shows. So the first job I ever had was actually, the anniversary was quite recently, 20 years ago. Dose magazine launched. It was that free publication that was a startup within Can West. And then of course the Marilyn Dennis show, a new show. So I knew very early on that my greatest experiences and growth and learnings that I know I'm going to be able to build off of for the rest of my career are going to happen in those startup spaces, because that is where you're making stuff up as you go. You're building the plane in midair while you're learning how to fly.
Yeah.
So the fact that TIFF, you got to experience them, going from being a 10-day festival to being a 365 event culture hub that is so integral to the culture of Toronto. You're part of the team that builds that.
It was phenomenal. Like, honestly, it's like I kind of feel like I peaked too soon when I was working there. You know what I mean? Because kind of everything afterwards has it's, obviously it's exciting to build my own business. I love entrepreneurship and I love being an entrepreneur. And TIFF actually really allowed me those first 5 years because it was so much about learning on the job. And it was having to do things without knowing what you're doing. We were all just trying to figure it out. And I think that's what made that time so special and memorable. And the ties so strong with those that I'm still, connected with today, is because we were working collectively as a team to make it work. We didn't know what we were doing, but we were going to do our best to try and figure out the best solutions. And from there, that's how we grew, and that's how we got stronger, and that's how processes got put into place. And, those key things that are really important when you're building a business. So it was very much that, that growth startup, working with TIFF also, which I think gave me a lot of experience and, needing to have grit in order to be able to weather those storms of whatever was going to come your way.
And I think too, when you're starting out, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you don't know any different. So the grit, the perseverance, the paying your dues, the figuring stuff out, you don't know any other way. So and of course, I mean, you have energy, but you're almost like a fresh canvas to your career. So you have an idea, you have an inkling, you have interests, but the older you get and the longer you stay in an industry, you start to feel a little bit more fixed and so when you're in an environment then that is asking you to take a leap of faith and to just, take chances and persevere and dig into the grit. I found it was easy for me to do at 20. It's harder for me to buy into that facing 50. Like this, I'm like, have I not, what else do I need to learn? So is that a similar experience that you're having now?
Absolutely. And I mean, also as someone who had a kid mid-time, I think it was year 5 that I was there, that changed the game. That's actually kind of when I moved from event production into doing more event sales, because, while I love events, it's a lot of work. And that building was 365, like I said. So it really, I had to make some shifts for myself in order to make sure that I could have family time. And, and that's true to kind of where I am today. And part of the decisions, that I make as a result of, where I am in time and space currently.
Mm-hmm. So what, I mean, TIFF was such a fruitful, informative time for you. You were also able to pivot during there, to have a more stable job while you're raising your young babies. What made you think that after 10 years, this is the end? This journey has come to, this chapter has come to a close. It's time for something new. What brought that on?
Really, truth be told, I honestly felt like I was aging myself out of this of being, in the organization. More so, it was, like everyone around me was getting younger. It's like that Matthew McConaughey line in Dazed and Confused, I'm getting older and they're staying the same age. And I was like, wait, what's happening here? And eventually you start making references to movies and TV shows that they just don't even know what you're talking about. And I was like, oh God. But, I'd also been there for 10 years and, having gone into the different departments, truth be told also is that if we're really looking at this honestly, I had moved into corporate partnerships. And while there was a degree of event planning, it wasn't necessarily scratching me where I itch, if you know what I mean. So it was just like, it had elements of it, but it was really like, it was account management, it was client management, all things that I'm very good at, but it wasn't the number one thing that event planning to me, it's literally in my DNA. I can't not plan things. And so even though there was like elements of, if a partner was doing something on Festival Street, there was a lot of planning, but you're kind of on the periphery of it. You're not planning it. You're not at the forefront of it. And that part I kind of missed, but I knew because of having lived the years that I had lived at the beginning, I just knew that I couldn't really go backwards and go back to event production because it just was not going to be sustainable for something that I had gotten accustomed to after years of not having to do, weekends and evenings and stuff like that, which was pretty disruptive when you have, a young family. So
I think too, what the picture that you're painting, and I mean, I'm sure other industries feel this way too, but I feel like when you're a creative person, you get into a certain field because you want to get paid for this thing that you love to do, and that you're really, really good at it.
Yeah.
But then in order to then move up in the world, I'm using this in air quotes, of course, your position becomes more managerial and more administrative and less creative. So it's a similar journey. When I was at the end of my tenure with working in network television, the next level up for me in terms of something to strive for a raise or a promotion, it was just going to be more calendars and spreadsheets and approving vacation. I'm like, this is not. I don't want that.
I never aspired necessarily to go to the director level for that exact reason. Like it was going to be less and less of the things that I love to do and more of the overseeing of things. I'm a doer. I like doing things and I consider myself a creator also, right? Because I was the one who would help come up with the theme and basically be the artistic director of the opening night party. Boombox, was always a thread of what we were doing in the gallery exhibits, but I got to really take on what is the party going to look like and feel like. And, as soon as I was getting farther and farther away from that, I kind of realized that this isn't really where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do anymore.
Ironically, then, entrepreneurship offers an opportunity to then go back to the thing that you're really good at, like connect to. This is the thing that it's my zone of. I call it the zone of brilliance, right? It's not just the zone of excellence; it's the zone of brilliance. I now want to build a business where I can do this full time.
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're now trying really hard to create full time, but then you then have to become the business owner in order to make that possible. So when did you have that realization of, I now have to do both of these?
Pretty early on, because I had actually had a hand in trying to have my own event production company when I was in my early 20s, when I was really young and naive, and didn't know anything about anything, but of course thought I did. Yeah. So I had an inkling going in of what this was going to potentially look like. But of course, every new business is a new business and you have to kind of figure it out. And so I knew that I could lay the foundation and have a strong foundation and know a direction that I was going to be going in. And then I kind of just had this attitude of like, well, I'll just learn along the way because I know I can do it, because I've been put into so many positions, be it planning an event or being at an event, where literally you have to troubleshoot because plan A didn't go to plan. So I just kind of figured, like, I know that if I go into this and I go into this headstrong and I go into this with, a clear idea, then I know I can kind of make this work.
There's a lot of parallels between what you do as an event planner and what I do as a producer. We make the impossible possible.
Yeah.
And it is true. It does attract a certain kind of person where it's like, just give me an idea. I'll figure it out on the way. Exactly. And there's a fearlessness of, it's okay. If something goes wrong, I'll do something different. Yeah. But I think, entrepreneurship definitely puts that test on steroids. I want to hear more then, because I also feel like launching a business in 2021, that's a different, because that's when I launched McEwen Media as well. But that, looking back, was a very different environment than what we are currently experiencing in 2025. So let's go back to the glory days of launching Chef in the House in 2021. Okay. How were people receiving this idea? Because again, like, this is a new idea in North America, chef-led dining experiences. Like, this is something I would probably see on The Real Housewives. Right. And you're telling me I can have it in my house. So how was that like, introducing the concept to people?
So at the time in 2021, obviously coming up with this idea, again, as I mentioned before, where, we still couldn't have people in people's homes. So, there was a certain group of people that were very excited by it. I was excited by it because it was like, ooh, it kind of feels like this is new. And, for some, it might have even been pushing a boundary of letting people outside of their typical bubble come in. So it was an exciting time, but it was also kind of like, is this going to work? Like, there was a big question mark hanging around this entire concept. So the feeling was, it was just a lot of unknowns, to be honest. Like, I didn't go into this necessarily with a marketing plan or what I was going to do. It was just more like, is this going to work? Let's just jump in with 2 feet and see what happens. And so the feeling of it was really more of discovery, as it was like live experience discovery. Like, how is this all going to happen? How is it going to be received? The good news was that everyone who did it loved the experience, because they said that they had never tried anything like this before, or they'd never done anything like this before. So I knew that I had something special, and that felt good, because, it's one thing when you come up with a concept and you're like, oh, how's this going to land? You don't know. But as clients were hosting events and doing this experience and like getting 5-star Google reviews kind of in my first year was really, it felt really good. It felt like, okay, I have something here. I just, it was the learning how to tap into it a little bit more.
Okay. So there are so many similarities to what it felt like for you launching Chef in the House and what it felt like for me to launch McEwen Media. That's why I feel like 2021 is such a unique time in our history. So with the work that I do, like, I just started booking people on television. So the first clients I had, they were established experts. So the first ever client was someone that I produced on the Marilyn Dennis show. So I wasn't dealing with newbies.
Right.
But I think because of the way that television was being made at that time, we were still doing television from home, that very soon I was getting approached and just like swarmed by people with no TV experience, but who wanted to get on television because it felt like it was accessible. It felt like it was something that they could do. I also have since, in looking back, realized that the solopreneurs and small business owners who were approaching me, they had a lot of money to spend, right? In lockdown, we didn't have, we weren't spending money.
We were pocketing cash left, right, and center.
There was grant money going around. So people had disposable income. So I had a similar exploration of, well, I'm just going to see what this can become. But I very quickly decided, this is my market. This is my target market. Solopreneurs and small business owners, this is where it's at. They're going to need me for forever. That was true for about a year. And then it wasn't. So So, but I feel like I want to applaud you then for having this early success, knowing that it's something, but still that instinct of it's not the thing yet. I still don't know how to leverage this. I still don't know how to make this sustainable. For me, the choice was maybe it's the breaking news producer in me where I'm like, the alerts come in. This is my target. And I had committed to be accessible pricing. I knew that small business owners and solopreneurs didn't have a lot of money. So that was where I shifted to, well, I'm just going to lower my prices and offer group programs and courses because, of course, everyone online tells you this is how you scale your business, is you offer group programs and courses. What they don't tell you is the size of a social media following and the scale of your brand that you need to have first in order to have the steady money coming in. So I spent about, I would say, 2 years trying to make that work, right? Just trying to make a square peg fit into a round hole. It was really only about 6 months ago where I realized I am selling this to the wrong person. I'm selling it to the wrong market. So can you then share with me the alternative side of things of having this thing? Because I feel like there are some people who might be in the early stages of their business. They're seeing that early success and thinking, well, this is going to be what it's like for forever. How was your experience of just kind of slowing down of this is great, but I feel like there's still something else for me to figure out?
Yeah, and a large part of that is we've got very parallel, similarities in terms of our business, because while I was getting the right demographic in terms of the age group of the 40 to 55 kind of plus, and I knew that, I was targeting myself to a lot of an extent. Like I was kind of building on this blind faith of like, oh, okay, I know people that, we want to have a really nice meal. We just want to spend quality time with our friends. We don't want to have to like have this 2-hour limit at a restaurant. We don't want to have to shout over loud music because we're of a vintage where that just annoys us now more than anything else. But, as you kind of grow the business and you realize, well, the volume's not really coming in, where am I missing the mark here? Like, how else do I need to kind of push this out there? And that is still to this day one of the pieces that I'm working on. Truth be told, it's I've been very fortunate that a lot of the inquiries that I get in are very organic through SEO, their Google searches, which is amazing. But like, I'm only just now, year 4, really going to start taking a more targeted approach to really like, because it's almost taken me this amount of time to realize, well, who is the demographic necessarily? Where are they?
Yes.
And how do I find them? And how do I really make a pointed effort of marketing to them specifically? Because while I was getting a lot of these organic inquiries, as soon as I would throw out a number, I would get a lot of people ghosting me. And so, I'm I'm attractive from the outside, as people find me, but then they realize that I do come at a premium price point. My services, I always say we're a culinary experience. We're not a catering service, and they come at different price points. So I'm having to really dig deep to take more time to be direct in my marketing strategies. And that, truth be told, is something that, I recognized for a while. I just haven't necessarily really done anything about it. So that's what we're working on this year. That's a 2025 thing.
And I feel like this is where, future me is looking back at this time and just where I'm at in the business now and is grateful for the economic crisis. We'll just call it a crisis. Like these are not normal times. Because some of the hard choices that I've had to face are in how much of my business decisions were led by emotion. I love what I do, and I love this space. And so I tweaked to when you said that you were using yourself as the target market. Same, especially serving solopreneurs and small business owners. I understand what they're going through, so I'm going to then market to them. But realizing, of course, marketing and media budgets are the first things to get cut on all businesses, and small businesses get hit first. So I've been talking about a recession for a year and a half. Like I feel like I'm a trendsetter, uh, in good ways and bad. So I've been kind of having this slow burn realization that I'm marketing to the wrong person. But I was so in love with the idea of making it television accessible to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to it and who otherwise couldn't afford it. That belief, that heart-centered belief that really started the business itself and has been driving me and motivating me, was also creating like catastrophic business decisions.
Right.
That was a really, really hard choice for me to accept. And I want to share with you, not to scare you, but I think this is a good thing for us to both realize too. So Shopify did a study. They always talk about the failure rate of new businesses, like if you can survive the first 2 years, if you can survive the first 3 years, blah, 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 blah. Shopify actually studied the fail rate of the first 5 years of businesses. They discovered that the failure rate increases every year for the first 5 years for a new business. But if you do actually make it through the first 5 years, from there, it is just growth and sustainability. And what they discovered was that the businesses that fail, the reason why the failure rate increases every 5 years is if they're not being honest with themselves, if they're not recognizing the catastrophic choices that made sense at the beginning, but that they're forcing them through, if they're not making these seismic changes in the first 5 years, that's what tanks them. Something that you can kind of get through and power through in the early years is not sustainable the closer you get to year 5. So I came across this study about 2 years ago. So as I was feeling this discomfort, I'm like, I know I need to face something. It's not necessarily in the business plan because the numbers, the maths.
Yeah.
The problem is it's me. I'm not being honest with what I offer. I'm not being honest with myself that this is an elite offer. Get on television. It's a big deal. And I should respect it that way. So when the economy started tanking or started taking a turn, I should say, at the end of 2024, I just did that inner search of what do I offer? Who needs this? I recognized that to the small business and solopreneurs, I was now a luxury item. So they didn't need me. So I just looked at, well, who needs me and who can afford me? And that's where I started making moves to then, position myself as a consultant to larger organizations. And I'm happy to report that in only 6 months, I'm already seeing those efforts pay off. So the business itself is just like the pivot that I know I've been working towards.
Yeah.
It's happened. And I got to say, it is so much easier and faster having conversations where the people need your service and can afford it. It's so much easier than the people who just, it's a nice to have, but it's not in the budget. Those are two very different things. So.
And that is, definitely something that I have to kind of take in myself and really probably take a little bit of a step back and understand, well, how do I get to and attract myself to that, the market that I think I know it exists. I just need to know how to tap into it. Right. And so, definitely taking those steps this year to really be more targeted and making sure that, I'm putting myself out there in different ways.
Yeah. So I think this might be actually where your TIFF experience can shed light on it, because TIFF it's a bougie experience, right? You get to be connected to Hollywood. You can touch Hollywood stars. You can touch A-list actors. Like it's bizarre to me how easy, accessible, elite people are in TIFF. So you were part of that world. So is there anything from your TIFF experience that can inform you of like who does have the means at this point in time to afford a chef-led dining experience, right?
So, I mean, when I put my TIFF hat on and looking at that, it's definitely, there's the corporate angle. So that's a niche that I'm really trying to target into also, because, I think since post-COVID, people are wanting to have experiences that feel meaningful There is some engagement. They're smaller groups now. I think that's still like a large component of corporate outings or client experiences or whatnot. They kind of skew on that small to medium size. So, I'm going to try and like tap into that corporate market that I know is looking for those experiences.
Yeah. So what is it? Yeah, because definitely like the corporate experience right now, corporations, they're managing very difficult messaging. They're making difficult choices. So corporate environment is challenging. But there's also, I think businesses of all sizes are seeing humans disappear, right? AI, they're, the robots haven't completely taken over, but the human touch is missing in business. So how does Chef in the House, like now we're just creating a commercial for you. How does Chef in the House then counteract these trends we know are happening in the corporate space right now?
Yeah, I mean, we are just that touch point for people. Like people connect around food, right? It's just I think that's a strong thing, and that was one of the things that I've always loved when I was doing events at TIFF. You would always hear the comments about the food. People will always kind of take away that, if you go to a wedding, they're talking about the food. So I think that level of connectivity for a corporate gathering, and then bringing in this level of engagement with the chefs, it's just tying in connection in a different way and something different and unique. And so I'm really trying to position myself as like, hey, let's do something different and have some fun with food.
What I find interesting too, like there are so many similarities with our stories. The one thing that is different though is you have a sales background, right? So you were in corporate relationships. You were selling events with TIFF. I've never sold anything. Right? With TV, it's like the closest would be like, please watch our show. But even in school, the early jobs that I had, I was in food service. So if you're going to a restaurant, you know what you're getting. I didn't have to. So I've never had to learn and understand sales. So that's where, especially when I was trying to, again, put a square peg into a round hole and sell my services, make them available to a market that just simply wasn't needing it and couldn't afford it, I really drilled down into sales and just understanding sales, learning sales psychology, but also learning how I want to sell. What I've learned, especially in a deeper understanding of what I do and how my work house business is, the first thing you need to do is sell your product. Like just learn how to sell it. Even if it's selling it in conversation, figure out what you're selling, who needs it, who can afford it. Then that understanding informs the marketing. And then once you have that marketing figured out, then you're looking at PR and visibility and publicity. I think a lot of businesses, especially in the beginning, we try to do all three at once. But if you're marketing, so for me, I spent so much time trying to expand the market, selling the right thing to the wrong people. So of course it never led to sales. But I needed to kind of go through that messiness to really understand, well, these are the shortcomings. This is where I'm keeping my business small, is I now need to get comfortable selling something. So where, in terms of selling Chef in the House, because selling for another business is different from selling something that is, an idea that came from your brain and is also rooted in childhood memories. Like there's an emotional connection to this business idea.
Right.
So where are your strengths and weaknesses in selling your services right now?
So my biggest strength is, if I'm an extroverted people person. So, you can put me in a room of people and I'll talk to everyone and I'll engage with them, and I can talk about Chef in the House quite easily and garner interest. There haven't been a lot of kind of networking events per se that I would have gone to. I'm in a networking group, and that's super helpful. But my biggest probably hurdle for myself is that, and this is kind of the dirty little secret, to be perfectly honest, is that I have done zero marketing. Like I literally have not done a stitch of marketing effort. So that's when I was like, in the year 2025, this is where we're actually going to be moving things, because things were happening so organically at the beginning. Yeah. And then I was very fortunate that I would get, a referral from someone, and then that led maybe to some extra business somewhere else. So things were kind of happening in in a trajectory that I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
Because on the side, I do a lot of freelance event planning as well. So it kind of was allowing me to slowly build the business at a level that I could sustain at the time when I was also multitasking with doing other contracted, events. So, but that's why this year has kind of changed. Speaking of pivots, I've lost some of those contracts. And so, the comfort, like that comfort blanket has been ripped off. And so now it's really kind of like, oh, you gotta step this up. If you want people to know about Chef in the House, organic was great. Word of mouth was great. Using your own personal networking skills was great. But now you actually need to put your money where your mouth is, and you need to target and strategic. So that's the dirty little secret. Because I wasn't doing anything. And so I also had this recent kind of really big aha moment. As we talked about, I was kind of targeting myself as a demographic. I'm close to 50, and I realized like, I was having a conversation with someone, and we were talking about social media, because I have a really hard time marketing myself on social media. Speaking of like hurdles, right? In terms of success and being able to sell yourself. I don't spend enough time on social media where I know I probably should. It's not a sales funnel for me. So it's always been more like a subsidiary. Here's a pretty little picture that you can look at if you've gone to my website, and you can go to my Instagram, or vice versa. So, I was having a conversation with someone, and, she's a millennial, and she said that she does most of her searches for her services and experiences on Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah.
That kind of blew my mind. And I had this aha moment again, that whole, like, I'm getting older, but everyone's staying the same age.
Yes.
Is like, oh, wow. Google searches might not exist for certain generations, because that's not where they're looking to find things.
Well, can I ask, is a millennial your target, like in terms of someone being able to afford and value and easily say yes to a chef-led dining experience? Is a millennial house party your target market? Like you mentioned earlier, you're looking at
they might be. You know what I mean? The thing is that they could be. And so I have to, it's going to be about like, well, what are those smart moves and smart decisions from a marketing perspective and strategy that I need to consider that I had not even thought of before? Because they're moving into that bracket, right?
I'm biting my tongue so hard it's about to fall off. Can I offer you some coaching in this?
Yes.
Okay. There's a lot of should I'm hearing in this, and there's a lot of dismissing things that were working. Referrals and networks, that's marketing. Marketing is simply creating a system where people know you have a thing and they can buy that thing. That's it. So I'll share again from my experience. I put a lot of money and energy into social media. McEwen Media has a very strong presence, right?
Yep.
Zero sales. I think $30 have come from social media. One person bought a challenge once because it was a link in an Instagram story. All of my other business has come from referrals. Everything has come from referrals. So when I was having my, hard look at what the choices I was making, that was one of the first realization was that my business, that sales are not coming from social media. Social media serves a different purpose.
Chef in the House falls under two streams, right? I'd say 80% of my business is social. So these are people who are throwing milestone occasions.
Yeah.
Weddings, engagement parties, anniversaries, milestone birthdays, a lot of those, like 40, 50, 60, like that's kind of like really where most of my social comes from. So, my marketing has to kind of fall under two streams to some extent, because I need to appeal to those that are looking for something for that special occasion where they are willing, they want an intimate dinner with their family and friends to mark a special occasion and celebrate something meaningful with a little bit of engagement, not just that catered experience where, it's ho hum. You're going to be delivering on a really premium kind of food experience. So So, the social media aspect, while maybe not a sales funnel per se, hasn't been, but this is where I need to explore. Like, this is where I actually need to see, like, to some extent, throw money at, and see what sticks.
Yeah.
I
think for you, social media serves more because you're also introducing a new idea. So for you, social media is more the education piece and the brand building. So
and showing how the experience exists and lives, because one of the biggest challenges is also, like, you can talk to people about, well, what's a chef-led dining experience, and they don't really understand it. So a lot of my social media to date has been kind of static. So it's also about looking at doing more videos and reels to really showcase what that experience can look and feel like. So there's that angle of things. And then as you were talking about targeting specific, so one of the, like, from a more corporate perspective, some of the corporate events that I have done have been with marketing, experiential marketing firms or marketing firms, because I did the Spotify Supper 2023. I think it was, they came here. Toronto was their, it was their first time coming to Toronto, doing the global Spotify Supper event. And so that was done with a marketing agency. And so that got my brain thinking of, like, okay, well, that was really successful. Every brand, if they're going to do an event, they need food and beverage. Every brand, if they're going to do an event for a special group of people, they want it to be a special event. They want it to have probably a celebrity attached to it. And maybe that's where I could kind of work my way in. So I am kind of in the process of also doing that more direct approach with marketing agencies, and, like, trying to get in with account directors to say, hey, if ever you're doing an event with one of your brands and one of your clients, and they're looking to do something that, has a culinary twist to it, think of me. So I am actually starting to target that a little bit more also, because I feel like that, when I say corporate, there's the financial firms and the whatevers who are doing client appreciation events, but I'd really like to see Chef in the House kind of align itself with cool brands that are doing cool experiences and tie in a really neat food and beverage experience within that event that they're doing. Because of my event planning background and being able to put on that hat and understanding, who's going to be in the room, what kind of theme are you looking to do? And in fact, one of an upcoming event that I do have is going to be doing a pop-up. There's a pop-up happening at a space, and we're going to be doing the food and beverage for that. So like, again, having fun with food and collaborating with brands, I think is a great new way for Chef in the House to kind of get in the corporate market.
So that's that's marketing. You're marketing. Like none of this. This is the year I take it seriously, because especially seeing the opportunity with the brands, corporate is still kind of like it's a behind the wall kind of experience. People who are at the corporate event, they understand this corporate experience. The brands, similar to the TIFF taking Hollywood to the masses, the brand experiences are a great way for you to introduce this idea to the general public, and then just use their social stuff. Like, just have them tag Chef in the House, use their resources. Again, there are so many different ways. I think once you kind of, this is how I find my way through these hard decisions, like these hard spaces where it's like, I don't know what the future looks like. Sometimes it's as simple as, well, this is what I love to do, this is what I want, and what possible path can get me there. I think that's where our experiences and just kind of this creative exploration and just kind of allowing things to appear to us. If you stick to a plan, and there was your plan is created with the awareness that you have at that year, you learn so much about yourself, about what the business is, about what the market is, especially in the first 5 years, and especially in these last 5 years.
Well, it's even the last 5 months. I mean, like, as the title of this podcast is Pivotal. So,
Uh-huh.
one of the biggest things that I'm also trying to navigate, as the year started was, interestingly enough, all of the event inquiries that I had coming in were not for dinners for 6 to 10 people. They're
No.
cocktail parties for 30 to 40 people. Entirely different than what it is that I'm doing. But I'm taking it on. I'm willing to give it a try. It's what you have to do, as an entrepreneur. When you see opportunity, you just, again, you just have to see where it goes.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that I'm working with some amazing people that are willing to kind of take things in this direction also, which is fantastic. So that has actually also opened a few other doors for me, I'm affiliated with a venue space and, have been able to get my way as the exclusive caterer of the space now. So I'm really branching out in different ways that I never thought I necessarily would when I first started the business. Again, and I think the one thing that, as an event planner, as a career, and what I like, being able to adapt, being able to troubleshoot, being able to pivot is it was just integral in my everyday, because I can assure you nothing ever goes to plan when you're doing a live event. Television's the same way. Something's going to happen, and you just have to make it look like it was meant to be that way. And so that's kind of how I'm adopting where things are currently with the business, is like, this wasn't the plan. But here we are.
Here we are. We still got here.
This is what we're going to try. And so it's throwing me a few curveballs for sure, because again, it wasn't like I even say I'm not a catering service, I'm a culinary experience. So for me, it's about, how do I still create that curated culinary experience for larger groups of people? So that's where I feel like my event planning experience can come into play, because I'm a creator. I have these ideas. I can get creative with, give me the circumstances. What's the venue? How many people? What's the vibe you're looking to create? And I'll make it work, just because that's what I do.
And I think too, following that path, like just holding on to, this is the core of what I want it to be, and then being flexible on how that shows up in the business. I think that is going to help you navigate through here too, because I feel like part of the reason why you're getting offers to do cocktail parties is because that's what's in the budget for people right now. Businesses across the board are going through this. Like, major industries are making these tough choices. Again, we don't know what the global economy is if there's going to be a global economy a year from now, but there is something on the other side. So I feel like every business, we're making hard choices, right? We're making decisions that we didn't think we would have had to make 5 years ago, but you do need to adapt and change and just be connected to the market and just follow, like, who needs this right now and who can afford it. That's how it is. To me, it's as simple as that.
And I mean, going back to TIFF, we always had champagne taste on a beer budget because we were not for profit. Sometimes it's hard for me to wrap myself around the fact that, like, now I'm the champagne taste and I need the champagne budget in order. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, that's the reality. And so there's a bit of a mind shift for me to also understand, well, no, but this is a champagne product.
Adrienne, I think you're pivoting. The future might not be clear, but the future's never clear, right? The future is always a little bit murky.
If we could look into a crystal ball, maybe that would make life easier. But I'm here for the adventure of being an entrepreneur. I'm here for the changes that comes my way. When I tried doing this many years ago, like I said, in my 20s, I was very I had blinders on. It was very, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this one way because I only want it to be this way. And I think over time, as I've grown and experienced, I think I'm just more open to whatever things can look like. Of course, it's a business, so you have to be strategic about certain things. But I think I'm also giving myself a little grace to understand, well, I'm still in a learning, moment with where the business is going. And, you can't control what's happening in the economy. You can't control what's happening, in the political landscape. You can't control things that are happening in your own family, so it's just kind of like, understanding that as an entrepreneur, you just have to be willing to take it all on and sift through the noise and figure it out and make it work. And
you can't control the world around you. You can only control how you meet the situation. And I think you are meeting the situation with grace and dignity and imagination and creativity. I see beautiful things for the future of Chef in the House.
Well, thank you so much, Tara. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. I love our parallel existences. You know, it's always nice to know that you're not kind of alone when you're kind of going through these things. You know, we all are doing it in our own little way.
And one thing, I know I kind of berated you a little bit on the judgments that you had about your social media. I want to applaud you for signing up for this. We rescheduled it a couple of times. I'm like, really? How thick are your kids? You stuck through it, right? Whatever was coming up for you, and even in the moment before, you're like, oh, I don't know, but you stuck it. You stuck the landing. You stuck with it. You did something that was hard, and I applaud your being more visible. So I think this is
my word is my bond. I live by that. So it's one of my business mottos. You know, if you're gonna, it's a handshake deal. You know, it's gonna get done. So thank you for being at least flexible with me.
So if people do want to learn more about you, you do have a social media presence. So where can people find out more about Chef in the House?
You can find me on Instagram at chefinthehouseto and on my website, which is www.chefinthehouseto.com.
Amazing. Thank you, Adrienne.
Thank you.